Heart of such violence. Gun court alone will not solve this problem. However, it is a necessary and unique strategy to foster consistency and certainty in prosecuting those who illegally possess guns in our community. So what is it? Well, gun court was developed by the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office in collaboration with the 17th Judicial Circuit, the Public Defender's Office, and Court Services. Starting on May 16th, cases involving the unlawful possession of firearms will be identified and assigned to gun court. Judge Joseph McGraw will preside over gun court. Two assistant state's attorneys, those to my left, Chris Carpenter and Amy Otani, will be assigned to gun court. We'll also have assigned public defenders and probation officers. The goal is to have all the relevant parties develop additional expertise when it comes to gun crimes and foster consistency. The primary goals of the gun court generally are, number one, to hold gun offenders accountable for their crimes. Two, to reduce recidivism among those who commit gun crimes. And three, to incentivize law-abiding behavior through thoughtful sentencing alternatives. Consistent practices and continuity of trained and dedicated staff will result in swifter case resolutions and just outcomes. The strategies employed will be evidence-based, and the outcomes will be monitored for effectiveness. Specifically, they will be monitored on a quarterly basis. So why is it needed? Winnebago County, and particularly the city of Rockford, is in the midst of a gun crime epidemic. And to my right is Deputy Chief Bob Reffett from the Rockford Police Department. He's going to talk a little bit about what most of our community already knows, that gun crime is a significant problem in our community.
Good afternoon. I just want to take this opportunity to thank State's Attorney Jay Hanely and the Winnebago County Court Services for putting this together. It's unfortunate that we have to have a specific gun court, but with that, it is definitely needed. In 2021, the Rockford Police Department recovered over 400 guns from the streets of Rockford. And we had over 1,000 incidents of calls for shots fired. With that being said, it'll be nice having a specific courtroom with a certain set of prosecutors and a specific judge to hear these cases. And hopefully that'll be a much more efficient process going forward. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. So a little bit of background. The first gun courts were created in Providence, Rhode Island, and New York. There's a smattering of gun courts throughout the United States, but I believe the appropriate model for Winnebago County is the model in Monroe County, New York, and specifically the city of Rochester. In Rochester, the catalyst for the creation of their gun court was a particularly violent summer where there were 84 gunshot victims in 93 days. Again, we're not exactly like Rochester, but we've had similar numbers here in Winnebago County, and again, specifically Rockford. Now, in the 17th Judicial Circuit, we are particularly adept at addressing community issues. Whether it be our response to mental health or substance use, human trafficking, or domestic violence, Winnebago County has always been ahead of the curve in response to issues facing our community, and gun court is no different. As I mentioned before, and I will repeat them, the goals of gun court will be to hold gun offenders accountable for their crimes, to reduce recidivism, and to incentivize law-abiding behavior through thoughtful sentencing alternatives. Again, the consistency and continuity will come through having an assigned judge, assigned prosecutors, and that should result in swifter case resolutions. So how will it work? We're going to get a little bit into how the sausage is made here, but I think it's important, and I'll answer questions if you have any. So one of the first things is, what is a gun crime? Well, I think it's best to talk in terms of two categories, and what I would call possession gun crimes and what sometimes could be referred to as an enhancement gun crime. So let's talk in terms of an example. So a home invasion. Someone can commit a home invasion with a baseball bat or any other weapon. The crime is home invasion. A home invasion where someone uses a firearm, whether they fire it or use it as a threat, in committing that home invasion, our legislator has said, okay, that's a 15-year penalty on top of what the normal sentencing ranges. They've essentially said it is a more serious crime. Those are not included in gun court. And I'll talk about the reasons for that, but I just want to give you some numbers. So from 2017 to 20, in each of those years, the average enhancement gun crimes were about 110, or about 4% of all felonies charged, roughly. And so what that means is it's a relatively small percentage of cases that will be excluded from gun court. And some of the reasons are this. They're more factually difficult cases or complicated cases. The intent of the defendant is different. If I break into someone's home in the middle of the night with a firearm and shoot at them, it's different than having a gun in my glove compartment, whether, an illegal gun in my glove compartment. In those cases that I mentioned, the enhancement gun crimes, you have victims. In most possession crimes, and really all of them, you don't have a victim. So you can see the difference in those cases. And so what we learned, or what we talked about and agreed upon in developing gun court, was that it should just be possession gun crimes. So let's get into some of those numbers. So on average, from 2017 to 2020, there were approximately 700 possession gun crimes charged each year. Now, before I go further, that can be a little deceiving in that that's not number of defendants, right? When we charge a defendant with a gun crime, there's often 1, 2, 3 counts charged at one time. But still, for the sake of the numbers, there were about 700 possession gun crimes charged each year. That's approximately 20 to 25% of the total felonies charged in a year. All right, so why is that significant? Well, let me back up also. Of the possession gun crimes charged, approximately 80% consist of just 4 types of crimes. The first is unlawful use or possession of weapon by a felon. That's the most common. Second, no FOID card. 3, aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. And 4, possession of a stolen firearm. So those 4 statutory sites make up approximately 80% of those possession gun crimes. So when I talk about having a dedicated judge and dedicated prosecutors, the elements of those crimes are very similar. The fact patterns are going to be very similar. There's a gun in someone's glove compartment. That gun is possessed. The driver who possesses that gun is a felon, and maybe the gun's stolen. You can see. It's a relatively simple fact pattern, and yet we're going to have some of our best prosecutors handling those, but you can see where those swift dispositions will come into play and the consistency. But what this data demonstrates is both the need and the viability of a gun court. So there happen to be 5 general felony courtrooms in Winnebago County. And I just told you that 20 to 25% of the felonies charged each year are gun possession charges or crimes. So essentially it is between 3/4 to a full caseload, so it makes sense, right? It also is why it's relatively revenue neutral. I have 2 attorneys assigned to courtroom A already. Judge McGraw is already in courtroom A. There's already public defenders assigned there and already probation officers. And also, again, the type of cases, as I discussed, will also mean that they should be handled in a swift manner, ideally within 90 to 120 days. That is a gold standard. I am not promising that that will happen, but that is a goal. So I mentioned the consistency, and I'll touch on that again. It is crucial that the adjudication of gun crimes be certain and consistent. And now, while I'm not advocating the state's attorney's office discretion or the specific prosecutor's discretion, I would like to create almost like a plea matrix. All right, and so that judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and most importantly, current or future defendants know the consequences of their actions. Let's talk about DUIs for a second. And let me be real clear. I'm not comparing a DUI to gun crimes. But anyone who gets their first DUI pretty much knows exactly what's going to happen to them in Winnebago County. The offer for a first-time DUI is almost identical. And they pretty much have a plea matrix. If you're on your 4th DUI, you're going to the Department of Corrections. And everyone knows that. There is a consistency in the way those cases are handled. In DUI court, for example, it's 2 prosecutors, the same judge, oftentimes similar defense attorneys. And so you can see that we're trying to kind of replicate that in the gun court context. And it seeks to balance rehabilitative strategies for first-time offenders and providing robust sentences for second and third-time offenders. But cases assigned to gun court will still proceed consistent with how other criminal felony cases are handled. A defendant maintains all of his constitutional and statutory rights. And the existence and operation of the gun court will not infringe upon the discretion of the parties or the adversarial nature of the proceedings. When a gun court case is initially implemented, So I've been asked, what happens on May 16th when it starts? Is every gun possession charge here in Winnebago County going to go to that judge? No, it's not. First and foremost, that would be a near practical impossibility, especially, a case could be new, it could be really old. It would also probably be very unjust to those defendants and really unfair to the judges who have put work and time into those cases. So it will happen gradually. So on May 16th, if we get a gun, that's a Monday, a gun possession charge comes in, that's going to be assigned to gun court. And so it's going to take 6, 9 months, maybe a year, until that court is mostly gun possession charges. Hopefully that makes sense. So I want to talk briefly, what I've talked about is what we've referred to internally as phase 1. So some of you I've talked to before, and even in the public, we've talked about what we've now called phase 2. And that really is a very robust and intense special probationary program for medium to high risk offenders. And we're talking approximately 10 to 20 people a year, about 5%, 5 to 10%. And I don't want to get too into the weeds because it's still in development. And that is not revenue neutral. That will take resources, money, and a certain level of expertise to kind of pull that off. I'm happy to talk privately about that. I trust, particularly with the collaborative nature of how things have been, that we will get there. But I know that had been talked about previously. That's not going to happen May 16th. That's going to require some work. I've already introduced Amy and Chris, but we're really lucky. And I should have beforehand got the number of years of experience we have standing before us, but I'm pretty confident it's over 20, if not over 30. Amy's a career prosecutor. Chris, we're fortunate, she was a defense attorney for some time and has now become a prosecutor. So as you can see, from the state's attorney's perspective, we are not leaving this to chance. We are putting our best and brightest into this court. Lastly, I want to show my gratitude. I'm proud to be a part of such a collaborative effort. I want to thank all who aided in the creation of this court, including the Honorable Chief Judge John Lowry, who's the Chief Judge of the 17th Judicial Circuit, the Honorable Joseph McGraw, who's the Criminal Division Presiding Judge, Nick Zimmerman, Public Defender, Tom Jakeway, Trial Court Administrator, and Debbie Jarvis, Director of Court Services. But further, I want to have a special thanks to our counterparts in Monroe County, New York. So they spent hours on the phone with us, over email, and without their guidance, gun court simply wouldn't have come to fruition here in Winnebago County. I doubt they're watching right now, but I did want to make a special mention of everyone in Monroe County, and particularly our counterparts, whether it was a chief judge or their state's attorney or their public defender or their head of probation. They all literally spent hours with us on this, and so we owe them our gratitude.